Yo, what's up, guys? So, on this channel, we talk a lot about traveling abroad and how to budget travel and giving you guys travel guides in general for the places that I've visited. But I never really talk a whole lot about myself and my experiences on this channel. So, I wanted to today share with you guys some stories that I have from living abroad. And so, obviously, every day is a story. And so, I narrowed this down into 7 stories just so I don't have to make this video super, super long. Okay, and so some of these stories are funny, some of them are not so funny, but there's also a couple references to profane language in these stories. So if you don't want to hear bad language or don't want to hear a reference to bad language, just go to a different video, okay? All right, that being said, my first story happened in a place called Leticia, Colombia, okay? So this wasn't the first place that I visited or one of the many places I visited, but when I arrived in Leticia, Colombia, I ended up searching for a place to stay for a month because I really liked the jungle region in general, and I just wanted to stay in a nice city like Leticia in the jungle for a month. Okay, and so I ended up staying at a hostel for a month in Leticia, and the funny thing about staying at this hostel was not only the fact that I was the only gringo there for most of the time, but how they actually treated me during my time there. And so when I first checked into the hostel, I was a little excited because it was kind of a community and there's a lot of people and they all speak Spanish. So it's like, hey, awesome, I get a month of just complete immersion in Spanish. And so, they start talking to me and started asking me questions about myself, obviously all in Spanish. And one of the most important, or one of the first things that people always ask me is, say, hey, where are you from? And so I told them I'm from Colorado, the United States. Just by telling them where I'm from, I was actually giving myself a nickname for that whole month that I was there. And so just because they knew that I was from Colorado, well, all of a sudden my name was Colorado. And everywhere that I went for that entire month, literally in Leticia, people would just look at me, Colorado, Colorado. They wouldn't say Sam. I don't even know if they actually learned my name. And so that's my first story. And so it was pretty funny just because, Leticia is a really small town and word got around. And all of a sudden, people I didn't even know were all of a sudden, Oye, Colorado. Before I knew it, I had become a quote unquote celebrity just for a little while. Obviously I left Leticia and I don't really hear from those people anymore. But it was a pretty funny experience. And so that's my first story, having my name be Colorado for a month. All right, so this next story I'm actually not too proud to tell you guys, but life happens and sometimes you gotta just be real and tell people what happens, right? So this story actually took place in 2 separate cities, okay? And so when I first started traveling, here's me with my awful unshaved, unclean beard and a cut on my chin. And so when I first started traveling, the first place that I went to was Cusco. And before I knew it, I was making friends and meeting people, and they were wanting to hang out with me and see me outside of a tour guide or walking around the street, something like that. And so I ended up meeting this one friend in Cusco, and we ended up going to a hostel one night to dance. And so that's one thing that happens in Cusco, Peru, is they actually have dance atmospheres in hostels. And so I used to work as a DJ way back when, and so I actually start to miss the atmosphere of dancing and just loud music in general. And so I was like, oh yes, sweet, I'm in Cusco, let's go dance. And so for whatever reason, when the dance floor opened up and there was nobody on the dance floor, I thought, hey, I should go out there and do the worm. This is what happens right here if you are not careful when you do the worm, okay? And so as you can see, I have a giant gash on my chin. Today, you still can kind of see it, right? And so that's something that will permanently be on me because of what happened in Cusco. But the funny thing is it didn't just happen in Cusco. And 6 months later, when I was in Iquitos, the same thing happened. I met a friend and they wanted to go dance, and I went dancing, and then as soon as the dance floor opened up, I fell and hit my chin and did the same thing again. So now I'm probably never gonna have hair on the bottom of my chin, but whatever. I had fun in Cusco and in Iquitos, right? All right, my next story takes place in Urubamba, Peru. And Peru was the first place that I went to when I first became digital nomad. And it's one of the places where I really started to practice my Spanish and practice the phrases and, learn the basics like where is, donde está, or ¿qué es eso? What is that? Or me gusta, I like this, And when I was walking around Urubamba, one of the places that I really liked to eat was at the market. And so this picture isn't the best picture to illustrate what I'm talking about in the world. But if you enter into this market right here, you go up the stairs, and then there's vendors sitting around where these windows are on the inside, and they'll be actually serving food, and the food is really cheap, and it's something that I became instantly hooked on. And long story short, I found a place that I really liked. I found a cook, a lady that was really good cook. She made really good soup and salad and rice and noodles, and I enjoyed eating there every day for a little while. And because it got to the point where it's like, hey, what's your name? What is this? Because I don't always know what I'm eating when I was in Peru. And I was just talking to her a little bit, and long story short, I told her, hey, I like your food. Me gusta tu comida. And she looked at me, and without even hesitating, she says, gracias, puta. And, I wasn't really sure what I heard at the point, but I was actually living with another English speaker who also knew Spanish at the time, and I went home and asked her, say, hey, what does gracias, puta mean? She said, oh, that doesn't mean what you think it is. It's not a nice word. So if you're curious, you can Google it. P-U-T-A, puta. And so that's my third story, learning Spanish. And, I thought I made a friend, but apparently not. I never went back to eat there again. Let me tell you that. All right, my next story, fast forward to Medellin, Colombia, where I'm actually currently located, but I will be moving because I want to go up to the Caribbean. But anyways, throughout my travels, obviously I was looking for ways to make money online. And I actually met this person. I'm not going to actually give his name and contact information, obviously, but I was writing a lot of DJ articles for his website. That's something I used to do. And long story short, he actually was a digital nomad like myself. I didn't really know this because, we were working through Upwork.com. And I was just more concerned with, sending him my articles, him sending me the paycheck. But over time, we actually sort of became friends, and we discovered that we were traveling to the same city at the same time. In this case, it was Medellin, Colombia. And so I actually met somebody that I was working with in real life, even though I met them online. And so it worked out really well because we're still friends and we still work together, and it's cruising. It's going awesome for us. But I thought it was actually kind of funny that I actually met somebody in real life that I had met online. All right, this next story kind of just illustrates my frustration in learning Spanish, but here's actually my current, I guess you could call it my backyard, and this is actually a pathway that I will walk down every day. Okay, so there's a sidewalk right in the middle here. You can't really see it too well, but this is a walk that I will go to every day because there's actually a big mall right down this way. So this sidewalk goes this way and keeps going straight. Anyways, there's a big mall at the end of that sidewalk that I like visiting, to get food or whatever I'm doing that day, shopping, something, I don't know. And there's always this guy walking down this sidewalk right here. I always run into him every day, it seems like. And he'll be walking around saying, agua, cafe, agua, cafe, agua, cafe. And so if you are an English speaker, you would hear the word agua and think, hey, he's saying water. And you would hear the word cafe and think, he's saying coffee, right? But one day I actually was kind of interested in buying some coffee from him. It was early in the morning. I was doing some work. I said, hey, ¿tienes café? Or you have coffee? And he said no. He said, all I have, todo yo tengo esta frutas, which means all I have is fruit. So I'm sitting there like, why would you say agua cafe if you're selling fruit? And so maybe a Spanish speaker will get onto this YouTube channel and know exactly what they're saying and why I'm just being a gringo. But I thought that was kind of weird that somebody would shout out agua cafe if they're not selling agua or cafe. So this story is kind of a collective story. It's a story that's kind of happened over time. It's a story that just keeps repeating itself. Okay, and this is kind of concerning on more of the political situation going on today. Okay, so I'm not going to come out for or against President Trump or whatever, because I'm trying to just stay out of the whole politics in general. But when I talk politics with people down here in South America, I never hear anything positive about America. It's always something negative. It's, oh, Trump's a racist, Trump's a elitist, Trump's this and that. It actually kind of gets to the point where if you kind of show that you're in support of America and the United States, people will kind of sometimes put you down. And so the point being, the culture in Latino America right now is not very positive towards the United States. And recently, I've started doing weekly English classes with a couple people from Brazil. And one of my students, she was telling me that because Donald Trump had been elected president, she's never going to go to the United States, and she had just actually started planning a trip around the world. And she said that it's a very common thing for people to talk about in Brazil. Is like, oh, what is wrong with America right now? Where are they going? And so, long story short, American politics is not very popular in South America right now. My last story also comes from here in Medellin, Colombia. And so this is the view of, I guess you could call it my front yard, which is located right next to a pretty big street. And, very cool scenery and sidewalks everywhere you go in Medellin. Medellin is just an amazing city for that sort of thing in general. But since I've lived here in Medellin, I have a store, a little mini mart that I like to go to in the morning to get, a snack for breakfast or some water or some coffee or something like that. And every single day that I walk down to this mini mart, there's an attendee who works there, and he doesn't actually know my name, but he knows that I'm an English speaker, and so he will always greet me in English, but he doesn't greet me by my name. He actually found a very creative way to greet me. And so every time I walk down there in the morning, I will be greeted by, "What the fuck, man?" And so that's been a daily thing. I will go down there and hear that every single day. That includes this morning when I went to go get a piece of pan queso bread, and I expect it to also happen tomorrow and the day after until I go to another city. But those are all the stories that I have for you guys today. I may or may not do more of these in the future, but I just wanted to share some of my positive and negative experiences traveling. So there you go. That's all I have for you guys today. Peace.